Welcome to everybody. Welcome to Just Festival and to this special event brought to you by the Bulgarian Cultural and Educational Centre in Scotland with the title Poetry, Precarity and Post-COVID Monuments, and hoping to raise many questions, but at least one of them would be, is it time for a new approach to poetry, to politics, to economics? My name is Ileana Netkova, and I'm one of the three curators of tonight's event, tonight's Just Festival event, including Daniela Dimova-Yaneva and Todora Radeva, who are with us today as well. But we're also the curators of another Just Festival event, which is which is not online, which is an outdoors installation called Hidden Letters, and which inspired two online events with some of the featured artists and poets in the project. Just a few words about the Just Festival on behalf of Helen True, the festival director. Just Festival is Edinburgh's human rights and interfaith festival within the framework of the Edinburgh International Fringe. And every year Just Festival brings artists and performers and scholars, researchers. We do the audience, our audience, to discuss key issues, key points facing us as a society. But this year, Just Festival is celebrating its 21st birthday with a special program of live as well as online events. And tonight's event is one of those online events that I'm really looking forward to. And the festival partner for tonight's event, as I mentioned, the Bulgarian Cultural and Educational Centre Scotland is the only independent organisation of its kind in Scotland. It's non-venue based, it's not non-profit organisation, which was established actually in 2017, and it also runs the only Bulgarian language school in Scotland. But the centre curates and produces as well as amplifies cultural events that feature artists and creatives of Bulgarian descent, often based in Scotland, ranging from the theatre maker Katerina Radeva, for instance, of One Destination Language, the theatre company, to all the 14 contemporary writers and poets that are represented in the Hidden Letters project, one of whom is here with us tonight, Nadezhda Radulova. And just before welcoming Nadezhda and all the other speakers tonight, a few words about the Hidden Letters project. As we say, it's hidden but in plain sight in the secret gardens of Edinburgh's St. John's Church, which is actually the home of Just Festival. So Hidden Letters is comprised of 6 brightly colored, very, you won't miss them, brightly colored park benches, wooden park benches, designed in the shape of the letters from the Cyrillic alphabet. In addition, well, they're those 6 brightly colored letters, but they have no graphic equivalent to the Roman or the Greek script. And in addition, there are 14 poems, specially commissioned poems that are attached to each of these letters that are presented in their original Cyrillic script and English translation, and they're by all these contemporary Bulgarian writers. So the Hidden Letters benches were designed initially by an artist, Bulgarian artist in Sofia called Kirill Zlatkov, and an architect, Ivan Ivanov, and they were fabricated in Edinburgh by Sandy Law, by Spas Yanev and Daniel Penev. But the project itself is the brainchild of Todora Radeva, one of our curators, co-curators, and who runs the Reading Sofia Foundation. It first launched 3 years ago in Sofia in 2018. And since it has been touring to Berlin, to Paris, to Budapest, to Plovdiv, Rabat, currently in Brussels, and later in Münster. So Edinburgh is actually the very first UK destination for the project. It is thanks to the initiative of the Bulgarian Cultural and Educational Scotland, Educational Centre in Scotland, an initiative for poetry activism outdoors and online, delivered in partnership with Just Festival and St. John's Church, but crucially with the support of the Scottish Government's Recovery Fund for cultural organisations and venues through Creative Scotland. And just briefly about our curatorial intention, ever since Daniela, Todora and I started working on the project amidst the global pandemic and Brexit, our intention was to encourage our visitors to reclaim the outdoor spaces, public spaces for poetry and multicultural activities, but also to reconsider the role of small cultures such as, Bulgaria, Ireland, Scotland, within Europe, but also within the so-called global village of the world literature, which was the topic of our first Hidden Letters talk. And ever since we launched the project, the Hidden Letters Edinburgh, on 6th of August, we have witnessed that our visitors are seeking and finding the hidden letters and turning this urban oasis of Edinburgh with great views to the Edinburgh Castle into a new sculpture poetry trail for reading and thinking, for resting and for meeting family and friends. And now, before I briefly introduce the speakers tonight, I would like to encourage you to post your questions or comments to our panel by using the Q&A function from the bottom menu of your screen at any point of our discussion. Because the format of tonight's conversation is a webinar, which means that you won't be able to see or hear the rest of our audiences, but please do note that the webinar is being recorded, and you can use the Q&A function or the button anonymously if you wish to do so. The recording will be published on all partners' websites, where you can already find our first Hidden Letters talk. There is also a live transcript of today's webinar, which you can access by clicking live transcript, again from your menu bar. Our event will last approximately 60 minutes, and I'll pop in towards the end to do a time check, and also that will be your last chance to ask any further questions. And now here are my kind of few words each in the way of introducing our speakers in order of their presentations before we open the floor for discussion. I'll start with Albena Asmanova. Albena is a writer, she's also a scholar and a political scientist based in Brussels, where another iteration of the Hidden Letters outdoor project could be seen currently, and I believe she's just been to visit this Hidden Letters Brussels project today. She has also been a policy advisor to the United Nations, the Council of Europe, the European Parliament, the European Commission, and Transparency International. But currently, she is an associate professor of political and social theory at the University of Kent. But the University of Kent has got a campus or school of international studies based in Brussels. Hence, that's why she is there. Her latest book is Capitalism on Edge, with the subtitle, How Fighting Precarity Can Achieve Radical Change Without Crisis or Utopia. And it was published by Columbia University Press last year in 2020. And this is the book, in fact, that prompted our conversation today. Yeah. I'll move on to Nadezhda Radulova. Nadezhda is a poet, a writer, editor, and a literary translator based in Sofia, but currently on the Black Sea coast in Sozopol. She's the author of 6 poetry books, as well as the children's book, Wonderful Alphabet, which is interesting in the context of our project. Nadezhda is the recipient of 3 Bulgarian national awards, 2 for poetry and 1 for literary translation from English into Bulgarian. And currently she's a lecturer in translation and editing at Sofia University. Her academic interests are related to the field of Anglo-American modernism, gender studies, and literary adaptation. And hopefully we'll add another point of interest after tonight's discussion, precarity. Why not? Alec Finley is our third presenter today. Alec is a poet, he's a publisher and an artist, visual artist, based in Edinburgh. Lately, Alec's work has been concerned with contemporary visions of nature and the landscape. And Alec has worked on artist residencies and exhibitions with the Baltic in Gateshead, with Yorkshire Sculpture Park, as well as performances and presentations at Tramway, Glasgow, the Tate Modern in London, Zariev Contemporary, Plovdiv, and ARC projects in Sofia, where in fact he did a joint poetry reading with Nadezhda a while ago. So currently Alec is undertaking a commission on Scotland's National Post-COVID Memorial, of which we'll hear much more about tonight. So on this note, Albena, over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very pleased to be doing this together with poets and artists. It's the first time, in fact, that my work connects with the artist. It's a big moment for me. Straight to the topic. Now, the COVID pandemic brought to light a condition of massive fragility, afflicting even the rich, scientifically sophisticated Western societies. And I don't have in mind our famous frailty as mortal beings. We hardly need a pandemic to be aware of our mortality. But the pandemic revealed something less obvious. It's a condition of politically generated economic and social insecurity, which has come to be discussed with the new term precarity. It is a new term in the English language, or the French have précarité, for instance. But curiously, and when a word is born, it is a symptom of a social phenomenon that is searching for a new name. So curiously, until recently, there was no such word in the English language. The term in common usage was precariousness. The new term precarity has been introduced, over the past 10, 20 years, actually in the dictionary officially only over the past 10 years. The new term precarity has been introduced to describe another phenomenon. The American philosopher Judith Butler, in her 2004 book, Precarious Life, the Powers of Mourning and Violence, drew the distinction between precariousness as a general human condition of vulnerability and precarity, which is socially generated vulnerability resulting from social marginalization, poverty, economic insecurity, political disenfranchisement, and/or violence. Social scientists for some time reserved this term to speak of the lot of those who are worst off. The sociologist Guy Standing, British sociologist, speaks in this sense of the precariat, which is akin to the proletariat, those on insecure, meaningless, and poorly paid jobs, the worst off. The core feature of precarity is powerlessness. Now, the word precarity has its origin in the Latin precarius, which means given as a favor, at the goodwill of somebody else, depending on the pleasure or mercy of others, something that is obtained by prayer or through begging. So this connotation of powerless, of being powerless when we depend on the goodwill of another is captured by the term precarity. So in my new book, Capitalism on the Edge, I claim that this condition of precarity as politically generated social and economic insecurity leading to our weakening, both as individuals and as societies in general, has become massive. It has become the general condition afflicting the 99%. It affects not only those lacking material welfare and suffering social exclusion, but also affects the insiders, those who are the skilled workers on good salaries and in seemingly fulfilling professions. Take the legal profession. Studies show that work-related anxiety has increased in law firms as a result of the persistent long-term downturn in demand for their services and the use of technology to replace human resources in that business, in law firms. Workplace suicide are everywhere on the rise. While at the same time, the overall number of workplace fatalities have steadily declined. So we work in safer environments, but workplace suicides, when people kill themselves on the workplace, are on the rise. These suicides are triggered by long working hours, hostile working conditions, competition, and employment uncertainty, among other reasons. Recently, the employees of Goldman Sachs, the young, the stock brokers, pleaded that their weekly working hours be limited to 80. They work in excess of 80 hours a week. So trapped in the always-on economy, unable to quit the rat race, our societies are very much like the city in Sylvia Choleva's poem from The Hidden Letters, a city steeped in a sorrow that won't go away even on Saturday night, a perpetual sorrow. One of the symptoms of precarity is that societies experience themselves in crisis even when there is no economic crisis. Since the beginning of our century, even before the financial crisis and after the recovery from it, there was this permanent narrative about crisis. Well, in principle, a crisis is a great thing. It unleashes creative energies, it creates an impetus for change. However, what we've been experiencing has not been a real crisis, but rather a state of perpetual inflammation, like a chronic disease caused by this generalized precarity. I have called this a meta-crisis or crisis of the crisis. So the COVID pandemic, in my analysis, was in fact enabled by this general weakening of societies. Think, for instance, of the paradox that the scientifically advanced, wealthy Western societies had such hard time coping with a virus that was neither completely unknown nor very deadly, in fact. The reason for this is that the pandemic was enabled, was prepared by this pre-existing epidemic of precarity, of politically generated insecurity. These societies have been so firmly trapped in the pursuit of profits in the global markets that they had depleted their financial resources and lost the political know-how to deal with public health care issues, with crises. Now, I come here to the most tricky point about this phenomenon of massive precarity. One might think that since this condition has become so general, this will trigger solidarity across classes, across professional occupations, across ethnic groups, but quite the contrary. Insecurity triggers the worst instincts in us. It makes us conservative and even reactionary. It triggers this anxiety of self-preservation. We become introvert, xenophobic, hostile to each other. And here is the role of art, I think, and especially of poetry, that can play a very important role in all this. It can convey the emotion, the reality, the experience of the precarity of the other, which is otherwise untouchable for us. Let me stop here.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for throwing this or unpacking what the precariat and precarity actually means. And I think it's now down to Nadezhda and Oleg to take up the challenge and see how poetry can fit into this notions. Nadezhda first, please.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you for inviting me. I'm very, very happy and honored to be part of Just Festival, both as a participant in this inspiring panel discussion and as a participant in the Hidden Letters project. As a writer, I would like to respond to this really inspiring introduction of Albena to the concept of precarity and its contextualizing in our today's world, and also connecting it to the world of art with a poem of mine, which appears in my last recent book, Little World, Big World. And I'll say a few words why I choose this poem to enter the conversation and to respond to Albena's words. The poem is called Niobe and is based on the ancient Greek myth about Niobe, who, because of her hubris, was punished by Leto. Actually, Leto sent her two kids, Apollo and Artemis, who killed all 14 kids of Niobe, her 7 daughters and 7 sons. So the poem is not just about the Greek myths and of its interpretation. It's about a very tragic event, which is part of our biographical time. You'll see what I'm speaking about. I think that poetry somehow is written, produced, pronounced from the point of precariousness, discomfort, anxiety, crisis, and actually through this it really reshapes reality, and redefines our human condition. Actually, if I quote the Bulgarian-born French philosopher Julia Kristeva, there is crisis in language and revolution in the poetic language, in the language of poetry. So poetry offers always a new approach towards reality and towards human condition. And at the same time, it is armored, it is enhanced, it is amplified by previous voices, by canonical or non-canonical voices. But somehow it connects, it helps us surmount the cultural amnesia that sometimes put us in this very capsulated position of a crisis, for example. So the virus of poetry is conveyed, and it actually it transmits to its audience, to its readers, something very important. Poetry make its readers leave this inertial terrain of the mundane existence and evoke experience of precariousness, of fragility, of vulnerability, and also of connectedness. And by doing so, it does not just bear our weaknesses, it also makes us more alive, more active, more seeing, ready to act, ready to change. So here is the poem. It's translated into English by a friend of mine, the wonderful British writer, Will Buckingham, whose recent book was published maybe a month or so ago. It's called, I don't know if it can be seen, Hello Stranger. And it also tackles these very important issues of the pleasures and anxieties of living among others and being a stranger oneself. So back to the poem, Niobe. The sources mention different numbers of children. According to Ovid, 7 sons and 7 daughters. In 1996, in Dunblane, in county of Perthshire, Scotland, there were 16. In the crosshairs is the mother's hubris. Apollo and Artemis take revenge for the dishonored Leto. In Dunblane, the motive is unclear. The gunman, Thomas Hamilton, finally shoots himself. But the gods again take pity. They turn the mother to stone and leave her the comfort of tears. The parents of the murdered Dunblane children somehow still survive. They know the darkness. Their hearts are turned to stone. As for what art does with this tale, let us look at the sculpture of Niobe and her youngest daughter. Of course, the ancient sculptor, perhaps driven by the dramaturgical rule of not depicting violence, has spared us the very act of murder, has also spared us the exequima with the children's corpses. The thing we see is Niobe, with her small girl, both of stone, as if Apollo, he a murderer, but still the patron of the arts, for a moment spares the little one, the one Niobe tries to wrap in her dress, to hide her, to birth her back into herself. One of the mothers of the surviving children in Dunblane told of her relief when she saw her own child among the living. And after that, her consuming guilt. In that very moment, she found herself able to experience relief. A mother is a stone that weeps. I guess you get my point to read exactly this poem, which tries to open a broader perspective on a tragic event, which is, as I already said, a part of our biographical time. In one of her newly published essays, the Nobel Prize winner Olga Tokarczuk points at the male figure from the anonymous wooden engraving on one of Flammarion books, Popular Meteorology, where a very curious man stands at the edge of the earth and passes his head through it and trying to look at the sky, at the unknown sky and the stars. Tokarczuk opposes this figure to the Vitruvian Man of Leonardo, who is actually static and is a central figure of our anthropocentrical world. Actually, poetry does the same, which Flammarion Traveller does, or tries to do. Poetry decentralizes our world tries the multiple possibilities of center, multiple possible narratives, and behaves in a truly eccentric way. In other words, poetry is a unique tool for crafting our world according to the measures of our humanity, while showing that our humanity is culturally, historically, civilizationally much bigger than the pathologies of the present day. And just a couple of words more, again, related to what I read in Tokarczuk's book. She quotes a recent biological research according to which human body, 55% of the cells of human body are not actually human at all. They are from the outwards, they are worlds, they are practically intruders, bacteria, parasites, parasitic fungi. It really guarantees us constant instability. And it really destabilizes the central position we occupy for several millennia. So my question I cannot provide an answer is, what is the future of a human being that, for example, some of the transhumanists imagine and dream of, this practically immortal human being which is armored with all this high-tech nano stuff, and at the same time is so vulnerable to the outer world, which constantly becomes one's inner world. So I think that embracing the idea that a human being is as fragile as any other existing thing might change our perspective, even on the last 2 years' dark experience. And this might turn our precarity or precariousness, our limitations, into a source of unexpected strength, knowing that we are somehow interconnected, not only through art. So I'll stop here. Yeah, thank you.
Well, so the challenge continues with another question here, indeed, how precarity is actually our mode of being, as all the other living beings and organisms here in the world. But I'm sure that Alec has got other questions there for us, and especially with his new commission that looks specifically at the way we remember and the way we can connect with these times of precarity and post-COVID in particular. Yeah.
Thank you, Ileana, and thank you to the other speakers and to the festival. I remember she knew what she was talking about. I remember my fear of going into the COVID room that first morning and doing it anyway, with courage and dignity, my head held high. I remember she loved the mallard ducks that live under the bridge, who sleep floating on the stream or coiled on the grass. I remember she was very well spoken. I remember she sounded like a teacher. I remember she was the first to throw a white chrysanthemum. I remember my wee boy's laughter as he played tag with other children on the playground. I hope he remembers it too. I remember 2020 as the best and worst year of my life, as it was the only one with my son. I remember the putrid acid smell of disease and the long lonely days and nights waiting for death. I remember meeting a lady who had just exited the lift in some distress. She was trying so hard to keep her emotions in check and even apologized for being upset. Despite this, she took the time to tell me that the ward staff were amazing and asked me to convey her thanks. Those are just a few of the submissions I've received to the Scottish COVID Memorial. None of them are written by me, and very little of the memorial itself would be authored by me. So I feel strangely quite mute. I've taken on this public role of gathering together a book of memory that anyone can contribute to. And I paint all of the memories that come in, and they'll become part of an archive. And they are the memorial, as well as it being a physical artwork. I felt that the pandemic had been such and is such a huge historical event that we haven't yet found a way to come to terms with it, to memorialize it. So the only way I could do it, given that we'd had adequate journalism and that we will have academic studies, was to turn to everyone, to ordinary people, and invite them to send in their memories. And as you heard, they range from people recalling loved ones who died, to people remembering playing with their children, to people remembering very minor events which have stayed in their memory. And so I wanted to try and create a book adequate to the pandemic. I'd rather respond to any questions the audience have, but I'm going to try and say a couple of additional things in response to what we've heard. We're not in a post-pandemic situation. The pandemic will go on for some time. People are still dying all over the world, and hundreds of thousands of people have long COVID. Hundreds of thousands of people have lost their income, their work, their lives have changed. Some of them may be caring for children with long COVID. So I never have felt that we were beyond the pandemic. And I still live with it myself as someone with long COVID. And my approach to the memorial is to try and, rather than have a culmination of a statue which a silk is pulled off to reveal it, is actually to try and extend the process of making the memorial through time. If one thinks of the Second World War and those different periods of coming to terms with it, beginning with war films, then gradually recognizing the home front, then the trauma of communities that had been ignored, then the Holocaust. I also slightly disagree about, I think there's a difference between precarity and unhappiness. I think there's a very strong connection between our existential anxiety and unhappiness and social media and the way it's changed our minds. And I'd like to introduce the idea of limit. One thing about the pandemic is that everyone experienced limit. Many people that don't often experience it encountered it in different ways. It has been a more uniform experience than many others, which is interesting and useful for solidarity and understanding. It's also revealed, as we all know, the fact that energy, pain, money, and even death are not equally shared. And I think, although I can't express it because it's such a simple idea, in order to talk about the equality of the experience of precariousness, I feel that we have to recognize its inequality. And that I come from a culture of social democracy, essentially taxation, where I was given a free education, we have an NHS, and that came out of an awareness of inequality and an aspiration for there to be more equality. And we've moved further and further away from that. So in the approach to the memorial, I simply wanted to introduce an unlimited amount of truth. And I can't explain why, but there is a different truth in the I remembers that I'm sent and selfies or Facebook posts. They have a veracity which reaches into what we've all experienced. And while it does mean that all of our experiences are equally valid, it doesn't confuse the fact that someone lost their mother and couldn't say goodbye to a very different experience of perhaps some people enjoyed the pandemic. So I haven't tried to crystallize. Instead, I've opened the memorial project out into an ideal of a kind of infinity of responses. And that's been an incredibly touching and wonderful thing to be the custodian of. That's really all I am. I think that's probably enough, but I would love to answer some questions and continue the discussion. I should just say, anyone can send an I remember to me, Alec Finlay. If you just Google I remember Alec Finlay, you'll find it. And the Scottish COVID Memorial will be in Pollok Country Park in Glasgow, but we also hope to make satellites around Scotland. I don't feel this is the right occasion to talk in detail about the nature of the memorial. I more wanted to introduce a kind of non-literary poetry, the kind of, I very much respect everything that Najdeeva said, but in a sense, I'm the opposite of it. Rather than the personal authored voice, I've given up that role on this occasion to just gather voices, because I don't think we have an adequate account of the pandemic. I don't think we have a settled will. I don't think we've come to terms with it. And I don't think it will be over for some years to come.
Yes, thank you so much for this powerful kind of clarification of how you're approaching the Scottish pandemic memorial. Indeed, Alec, and I believe that I'm sure, in fact, that Albena and Nadia will have something in response. But before giving them the floor again, I just wanted to encourage everybody today with us to possibly use the Q&A function. Otherwise, we'll just continue this interesting discussion here between ourselves. So yes, perhaps back to you, Albena, and then Nadia.
Yes, Nadia, very, yeah, she actually struck right at the most interesting controversy. Sure, let me put it this way, instability crisis, of course, it is a source of creativity. Or like Ivan Landjev put it in his poem, an accident is still a chance to set out together, to set out in one journey. But human suffering has inspired great poetry. And yet we would not want to perpetuate human suffering because it is a source of creative, endeavors of poetry. I'm just teasing. I know that that's not what you mean, Nadia. I would agree. However, the crisis can provoke a catharsis, and on the other hand, that stability can be an entrapment. It can be oppressive. However, the opposite of precarity is not stability. Remember, the essence of precarity is disempowerment. So the opposite of precarity is empowerment, not stability. So the idea is, how can we transform, with the means of poetry and politics, precarity into a beneficial, creative instability? And in my book, I at least cover the kind of the political economy of that challenge. Now, Alec, very importantly, indeed, to question the link between precarity and unhappiness, precarity and inequality. Let me put it very bluntly. I grew up in a society that was relatively equal, at least not very unequal. But there was a lot wrong with that. There was precarity, there was oppression. So we can have perfectly equal, but very poor and very precarious societies. So equality in itself is not the solution. But I agree that the new phenomenon of precarity invites us to ask, the great question is about the inequality within precarity. Not so much economic inequality, but the conflicts of precarity, the inequality of precarity. This is a new phenomenon that still needs to be explored.
I just wanted to say very briefly something about Dunblane, which came to mind. I used to live there in the 90s. In a way, one of the most beautiful poems I can think of, and an image of empowerment, is that we changed the gun laws in Scotland. That it did lead to a recognition, a solidarity. There was only one mass killing, and many people enjoyed shooting, but there was a community of acceptance that the pleasure some people took in guns needed to be let go of, because this event had an impact on us, on a town and on a country, which would be an example for me of a kind of empathic solidarity. So I'm very interested in limit and creativity. And people were willing to accept a limit on their rights to own a gun because of the grief of that event and the injustice of it. And I almost feel that that law would therefore figure as a kind of a poem.
Yes, and Nadia probably, yes, we started talking to Dunblane. Back to your poem, yeah?
No, I just wanted to say that really the word empowerment, first mentioned by Albena and after that by Alex, is very, it's a key word here, because what art and poetry and the possibilities for solidarity gives us as a chance is this kind of empowerment that somehow we need in order to transform. I absolutely agree with what Albena said, that of course human suffering might not be, shouldn't be seen as a source for creativity and for making art, but through art and through also what Alec is doing in this project, through preserving memory and somehow transmitting memory to probably the next generation, somehow our otherwise very short life, our very limited biographical span get some longevity. And through writing and through reading, especially through reading, we live much longer. And we are much fuller beings. we we live many lives in one life. So that's why I think that remembering and also integrating other voices, no matter if in a personal art or in such collective art with huge social impact, like that one that Alex speaks about, is very important, especially in such a moment. We should use language in order to sorry, my connection is not very good at the moment. Recently, I thought about the fact that the Greek letters, we use them now practically to name strains of COVID: alpha, beta, gamma, delta, iota. And it's really so sad that we are making a language, contagious language of sickness now. And this is something that also art should change somehow. We should find other languages, other possible languages of personal experiences or of artistic experiences to somehow to give some sublime dimension to this, to our individual misfortunes, to our individual tragedies. So yeah, maybe stop here.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nadia. And what a poignant point about the Greek letters and perhaps being used in this pandemic context, but also to mention that the Cyrillic alphabet is so closely linked with the Greek letters, and the fact that you started with the Greek myths, in a way, it's yet another kind of reminder that things have been kind of the way we interlinked through the centuries. I mean, the so-called invention of the Cyrillic alphabet dates back to 1893, and later on, when it was actually completely reworked. But yes, why did we end up, or why the scientific community end up appropriating the Greek alphabet for the pandemic? That's really one of those pertinent questions indeed. But just a quick question. I can see that there is not another question in the Q&A section there. Yeah, to encourage you guys who are on with us tonight, please do pose some questions to our panel. Otherwise, we'll just carry on. And I have this kind of another semantic kind of question, I guess, and the role of charity when it comes to the precarity. You mentioned, Albena, that it's almost, precariousness is almost the point when we are given something is given as a favor and obtained through prayer and begging. So what's the role of charity and the charitable institutions? And they proliferate within the cultural sphere, if you like, and so much of our cultural activity is precariously balanced on charitable acts, of whether it's individuals or charitable institutions, and not so much on structurally kind of integrated support from the government, wherever we are. So how do you position precarity and charity in this context?
Well, charity is a crutch. It's a symptom that politically responsible, accountable social power is not involved, is not doing its job. But I was thinking that the first victim of precarity is art in a double sense, both for the artist, but also for the audience. In context of insecurity, even those who can afford to commit time to art, who have the leisure, the means to do that, do not dare to. In my book, for my book, I looked at surveys of millionaires, how they relate to their work and their millions. And 90% were saying that they live in constant fear of losing it all, and that they would rather much not work, but they work out of fear. So this is where the audience, or if you wish to use that horrible word, the consumers of art are vanishing. So that is why we need to fight for the return to some sort of a economic and social stability that does not rely on the iron fist of autocrats, of dictators, because this is actually the shortcut to maintaining social peace. It is through autocratic, through dictatorships. But you know, to return to some sort of probably type of regime that we haven't experienced truly, because the welfare state of the 60s and 70s very much relied on a bureaucratic heavy machinery, and we don't want to return to that. So we live in times of kind of that are very propitious for inventing a new socioeconomic and cultural model of life. And that's very exciting. Let's not miss that chance. What has been tried before would not work now. So we know what we should not be repeating. So we need a politically liberal welfare state that is not consumerist and leaves a lot of leisure. And strangely, it's not such a far-fetched utopia, because in terms of the technological means of producing the necessity of lives with very little input of labor, we have reached that point. We have the technological capacity to produce our lives with very little time dedicated to productive labor. We simply do not dare, because our political economy currently pressures everybody to spend all their time making money. So alternatives are really at our fingertips. They are possible.
So I guess we are getting near towards our allocated time for tonight, which is something we wouldn't have expected to go fast, to go by so fast. But just the final round of we've heard about the alternatives in terms of Albena's research. What are the alternatives for us as artists and poets and almost custodians, as Alec mentioned, to other people's thoughts and ideas and remembrance and modes of remembrance. So I guess Nadia and Alec, you'll probably have the final word to give us to end us on, hopefully on a positive note. Yeah, Nadia, or Alec first, perhaps?
Yeah. Okay.
I think that the positive experience of the pandemic for many people, if we can look at a positive, was that it was a kind of experiment and dry run for a different kind of life and economy, which felt like an adaptation to climate breakdown, that we lived locally, that our lives were simpler, but sometimes still very rich. And people learned to do things that did enrich their lives. So while the pandemic is not necessarily the way one would wish to enter that, we've made no attempt to adjust to climate breakdown or to a socially equitable society. So the pandemic was a moment where it showed that enormous change is possible. We've lost that impetus in just the same way as we've lost the impetus for all change in a general way, because politics is so mired, and again, the impact of social media on discourse. But as an experiment, it was enriching in the possibilities it revealed, which disabled people know very well, which is that you can live with limit and be creative. And the best art comes out of limit as well. But limit is not the same as precariousness. That's the key.
It's a good distinction for precariousness and limit to take away in our discussion today. But Nadia, you seem to have the final word now.
Yeah. Well, I think that I will continue a bit the words of Alec, but what these two COVID-19 years somehow demonstrated is that we are not separate. Actually, this contagious disease connected us into a global body. And I think that knowing that we inhabit a global body, we have to start feeling also somehow as a global soul. So we have to feel empathy and to act as an empathic beings who are connected. And to read, of course, because reading always helps to feel more, to go beyond your limits, to transcend your limits, to be more than you are. So maybe, yeah, that's what I would like to say at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, yes. It's almost like I would like to paraphrase Heinrich Böll, who is the Nobel Prize winning for literature, 1972, I think, that behind every hidden word, he says, but in our case, behind every hidden letter, there is an entire world that needs to be imagined, that must be imagined. So it's almost like that's what you've been doing in the past hour, Nadia, Alec, and Albena. So where is the word precariat? Where is the word limit? Where is the word delta? In this case, so now be. But so what's left for me to say is just thank you ever so much. Thank you on behalf of Just Festival. Thank you on behalf of the Bulgarian Cultural and Educational Centre in Scotland for this wonderful insights in your work and in other people's work. And yeah, just to remind our audience tonight that this conversation is recorded and we'll be able to spread the word even further, to keep on reading, as Nadia was saying, to keep on listening, to keep on empathizing. Yes, for those of you that can possibly spare a moment and see the Hidden Letters project in real life, in Edinburgh or Brussels for that matter. So please do undertake this journey as well. So thank you ever so much, but I see that there is a little comment in the Q&A that probably will finish us off. Katerina Radeva, who says, thank you, really enjoyed listening to you all with love and respect, Katerina, Kat. So thank you ever so much again. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.